Okay, and you say this book you read around the time of transitioning in your career, right?
Yeah.
And how have you found being an actuary in your new role? What actuarial skills have you managed to bring to the table, if any?
Yeah. Great question. I think, I think traditional actuarial skills are maybe one way of describing the skills. 'Cause I think the actuarial skill set is actually quite broad.
Yeah, how would one even define it?
Yes, exactly. And I would use a little bit of the way the actuarial society thinks about it. I mean, there's technical skills that you have, but there's also that normative professional component that is a big piece of our lives. And I'm not sure, I think as actuaries, we sort of know it's there and we maybe appreciate it, but we don't quite engage maybe the way we should with it, because that is a bit of a differentiator. I think our technical skills are important, but our levels of professionalism and how we approach problem solving, I think ethics, all of that is very different. And so, I think that bit of life, and I include in that leadership skills and communication skills and all that, training as an actuary and working as an actuary allowed certainly me to build. All of that is transportable.
Okay.
Doing the right thing, clear communication, being a professional, that is all the way. And in some instances, one could argue that is more than 50% of it, right? And so I think all of that has come across. I think on the technical side, it's a little bit tougher for the more insurance specific concepts that I certainly have been exposed to over time. But more general financial maths concepts are valuable everywhere.
Interest rate calculator.
Exactly. Exactly. Mortgage calculator. Exactly. That stuff definitely follows. That you're able to manage. And I think even just some of the complexity that we have dealt with as actuaries. So we generally work in industries that are complicated, and that technical complexity does mean that when we see different business models, so like a property classifieds business model is a simpler business model to an insurance business model. And that allows then, us to, certainly me, to better understand what the drivers are of an underlying classifieds business model. Whereas I think if you had to switch it around and somebody who hasn't had the training we've had trying to understand an insurance business model, it is much, much, much tougher.
Yeah.
And so I think that I have lots of gratitude for that technical translation across that. It has made it easy to settle into some of the business conversations because we understand the business drivers.
So for actuaries who do want to, play up these, normative skills and perhaps get involved in wider fields and non-traditional areas, what advice would you give?
I think maybe the first thing is actually to realize that you have them, that they actually exist, and to think really hard about what they are. So, and I'm not just doing this because it's part of our requirements as professionals to have diffractive conversations and to write it down and all of that, but that process actually does help you hone what it is that you bring as a professional. And it has, to me anyway, extremely useful additional builds on that. So once you've had the conversation and figured out what you're good at, you can then start working out, well, maybe I need to improve on other areas, and then you can have those conversations. But you can also then communicate to others why it is that this is something that you are good at. And it unlocks different parts of your mind, and it unlocks different ways of communicating, and it also unlocks a little bit of different ways of thinking about yourself. So that would be the advice, but spend enough time on the normative side and try and sort of better understand yourself. I mean, this is actually self-understanding.
Start being aware.
There's self-awareness. And I think that, if you're an actuary that only focuses on the technical skills and not the normative as well, I think that's where maybe you're not fully aware of just the power you have, because you can actually play across both quite comfortably. And it, this concept of technical actuaries, in my career, I've never actually seen that before. The true, the caricature that sometimes ends up on TV screens, and that person, I've never met them in South Africa, never, because even the most technically strong actuaries have such a amazing sort of professional component to them. And that's the bit that I think people need to reflect on as they think about what they want to do.
And you would recommend, having that reflection, if not making a move, at least, thinking about it, having those conversations.
Exactly. It doesn't have to lead. I mean, the move across industries is just one way of it's just one way of maybe allowing some of those insights to play themselves out. I think if, doing that reflection and then pitching up differently at work changes the way you approach work. Interestingly, my wife recently has been talking quite a bit in media circles on a concept called bore out, where people are actually getting bored at work, and that's the remedy to that is growth and learning and changing and just figuring new stuff out. And this is exactly in that. And if people are feeling a little bit uncomfortable, you're probably sitting in a place where there's a lot of opportunity. It's just reframing how you see the opportunity.
I can think of so many examples in my life, and that is where, and it sounds cliche, but that's where the growth happens.
Yes.
So back to the reading. What's your perfect reading setting?
Sure. So I think so I have 3 small boys. And with the 3 small boys, there is no perfect reading setting. There's only a reading setting.
Take what you can get.
I'll take what I can get. Yeah. And so maybe there's two elements, sort of almost non-negotiables. I think the one is, it can't be extremely noisy. So as long as it's about a coffee shop level of noise, I can probably handle
kind of white noise.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Just that hum. And the other one is, I don't like to be rushed when I'm reading it. So when I'm reading anything, so I'd like to choose when I start and when I end, and so that can sometimes be tricky. But if I can get those 2 things to work, then it's working.
Okay.
What that invariably means is that if I can get it right, it's just before bed, so nighttime, bedtime for a little while. When I'm in an airplane, I find sitting in an airplane a very good time to read a bunch of things.
No phones to distract you.
Phones, and generally just a little bit of white noise from the engines, and good to go. And actually, I read a lot standing at the bar, our bar at home.
Interesting.
So we have and that actually I find is a very useful situation for me, because first of all, standing, I'm a big fan of standing and sort of working and reading and things, and it's at the bar, so it works really well. So
can you drink and eat while you're reading?
I can, definitely. I can.
Okay.
I can. And especially, and that adds to the joy, actually, the bits, not at bedtime, but the bits at the bar in particular I enjoy, because then it's having a little bit to drink and reading as well. And snacks and whatever. I quite enjoy.
What's your favorite reading snack?
Whatever actually is there. There's nothing. It's
more the ritual.
It's more the ritual, exactly. Yeah, a little bit of biltong, nuts, that sort of thing. Yeah, whatever's available at the bar at the time.
Amazing. Can you read us your favorite quote from Autobiography of Yogi?
Yes, definitely. Okay, so this quote was when Parmahansa Yogananda was describing another yogi. Okay, so he fitted the Vedic definition of a man of God, softer than the flower where kindness is concerned, and stronger than thunder when principles are at stake. Again, it's one quote out of thousands in this book. I could have probably picked one quote from every 2 pages that I read, given how dense it was. But that spoke to me.
It's like a steel hand in a velvet glove kind of thing.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. What's the 4th book?
Oh, book number 4. Okay.
Yeah.
So this one, this one is called The Happiest Man on Earth, and it's by Eddie Jaku. Now this is, this is a book that I received in 2022, I think, also for as a gift, and I actually read it extremely quickly. It's a very easy read. It's not easy because of the content. Content is quite heavy content. It's easy because of the way this gentleman has written the story, and it's a story of someone surviving the Holocaust and the horrendous treatment that he had underwent, but also, and this is why he described himself as the happiest man, it's the philosophies and the life lessons that he had picked up that actually led him to where he was at the time he wrote this book. If you read it and what he went through, and him and other people, it's unbelievable. And I think, we at school and in various situations, various academic situations, we get some knowledge because you're learning it from a history perspective, or from, you are being taught something. But hearing it from somebody who went through it is absolutely sort of life-changing, actually, when you read it. When I read it, at least. Eddie Jaku, he passed away 2 years ago at the age of 101. Oh, sorry, 3 years ago at the age of 101, right? Given everything that he had gone through, was just amazing. And so this book for me, the reason it's so important is it's just a gratitude book. It just sort of reminds me, and anybody actually who's feeling perhaps that things are a little bit too much and things are a little bit busy and I can't balance this and I can't balance that, and all of it seems a bit overwhelming. This does help put things in perspective. It's by no means minimizing anyone's problems, but it definitely gives you a perspective what actually happiness means, and what how can you get comfortable in the situation that you're in. And so I found it amazing, absolutely amazing.
Do you have a quote from the book that you like?
I do have a quote from this as well. So, sure, yeah, okay. So he says, there are always miracles in the world, even when all seems hopeless. And when there are no miracles, you can make them happen. With a simple act of kindness, you can save another person from despair. And that might just save their life. And that is the greatest miracle of all. And this kindness quote and this man's approach to just being, it is unbelievable. I mean, it is.
Have you read other survivor accounts or Holocaust books?
No, this is the first one. And so it's definitely spurred something in this, because the philosophies of people that have been through something like that must be very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think for me, some of the most impactful books I've read have been, I haven't read this one, I'll add it to my list, but have been these Holocaust memoirs, Viktor Frankl, Elie Wiesel, Martin Gray, and they all have these extremely profound philosophies, as you say, that, actually so obvious and, can really just change your life in a sentence. You are very involved in ASSA and education and leadership. Can you tell us a bit about your work on ASSA on the education side, and then excitingly your role as President-Elect?
Yeah, sure. So, I've been on the education. Well, my first involvement in education was actually during the localization of the actuarial exams in the late 2000s into 2010. I was in council at the time, and so I'd been involved quite heavily in that. And some of the papers that I'd written at that time were all around how students and their psychosocial support networks, how the interactions work, and how we can make, how students can become more successful. How can we get better success to the actuarial qualification system? So I wrote a couple of papers on that and trying to understand what the almost the flow of students through the system actually looked like.
I remember some of that work.
Yes, and you would, yeah, Pamela, of course you would, being someone who took up the mantle wonderfully and produced some amazing work of your own, which you've subsequently presented at various conventions as well, which is fantastic.
Shameless plug.
Yeah. And when we went abroad, I took a break from serving on the actuarial society structures. But when I got back in 2014, I then rejoined the Education Board, and then about 4 years ago took over as chair. 3 to 4 years ago took over as chair of the Education Board. And so the work, I felt it was a little bit of coming full circle. That the localization of the exams happened. Various recommendations around the type of support that we needed to create as a society, coming back and then actually getting a chance to run some of that was absolutely fantastic.
So would you say that localization process has been a success?
So I think it was definitely the right strategic move for the actuarial society. I think by all accounts, I would regard it as a success. I think having a society as large as we are and being able to proudly produce our own local examinations and content appropriate for those examinations and teaching students on curricula that are designed for the South African context, that is what we're about. We're not borrowing concepts from anybody else, and we're not training actuaries for a different environment. Training actuaries for South Africa. So I think it's been a success. I think we've established an extremely strong governance structure through our Board of Examiners structure, and then the Education Board. We've got good relationships across the different stakeholders. The university system is the backbone of the South African actuarial education system. And all the work that goes on, mostly by volunteers, to improve the curriculum, to bring in new and exciting concepts, data science, potentially generative AI eventually, the work done to deliver tuition interventions, the work done to accredit universities, the work done to engage students on an ongoing basis, normative skills development, which for many countries is a bit of a world first. Some of the way we've approached our ongoing normative skills development is fantastic. And so I think we've got a lot of very interesting stuff that's happening here. And we've got extremely talented people in the system that have put their hand up and been counted and didn't just do work, they furthered it. They vastly improved what we've achieved. So the education work has been wonderful.
Yeah.
And I actually get involved as well outside of administration and leadership. I mean, I still do marking and I still do examining, a little bit of tuition if needed. So I do have a very sort of strong passion towards the education side. That will be put under a bit of pressure and tested now with the new role as President-Elect, and as I move into the President role, it's going to be a busy 4 years. I hope to be involved as closely as possible, still with the education system. But the good news is there are strong leaders all around that education system as well.
And does that kind of thing make you optimistic about the future of South Africa? It's almost a bit of a microcosm for, people so invested in our future and our education and our young actuaries. And
definitely. So the one area where I have got a better understanding now than I had before, but I'm definitely not sort of an expert in yet. So I represent the Actuarial Society on the South African Maths Foundation Board. And I view that as, that's the feeder group that will now become actuaries in the future. And all the work that board does around, it's predominantly Olympiad focused at the moment, but the interventions being pulled together across multiple industry bodies and multiple stakeholders under the broader banner that actually there's a crisis here and that we need to solve this crisis. If you watch, as I have watched the way strong leaders have then coalesced around this, pulled organizations together, allocated resources, got aligned. Yeah, it's not all perfect. And yes, there's still a bit of coordination and alliances still need to be worked on. But it has been really, really cool to see that there are so many people still invested. And that's the point. We talked about it before. From the data that I see, there are still enough people committed 100% to make this work. And the good news is there's people in the system that understand the problems and can articulate the problems and then, looking for a solution. So none of it's silver bullet stuff. A lot of it's systematic, especially our maths issues in South Africa are a legacy of our past. But no problem is unsolvable. We've got the right people.
Yeah, and these are people who have options, who could leave if they wanted to,
Exactly.
but realize that it's worth staying.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Look, and we certainly see it as a family, and we see it as a friends group, and it's obviously topics that enter conversation regularly at work, at family gatherings, at social gatherings. These are topics that everyone sort of grapples with. But again, I mean, it's, things can be bad and getting better at the same time.
This is why we've chosen your most influential books to talk about. What's the last book you have?
Yeah, so the last book came. So the last book is a book by Julia Middleton, and it's called Cultural Intelligence. Now, this book was required reading for a leadership course that I had the privilege of going on in 2015 and 2017. So it was an on-site leadership course in Kenya and in Sri Lanka, and mainly South Africans in the contingent, but lots of other people with in countries outside of South Africa on the continent, so many different nationalities. And the core of the course was about leading across cultural boundaries, leading across international boundaries, and being able to influence people from very different backgrounds, diverse backgrounds. And so this was required reading.
Okay.
Julia Middleton is the head of an organization called Common Purpose, and they actually ran the leadership courses for us. And the core of this is about or the center of the book is around concepts of core and flex. So your core are the strongest beliefs that you hold and the value systems that you hold that you're not willing to change for anything. And then the flex is that part of you that you actually are willing to change and adapt depending on the situation that you're in. And cultural intelligence, in the way this book talks about it, is being able to better understand where your core and flex is, doing work on that core if your core is too big.
Okay.
Because in a world where we actually are required to hold something dear and then actually demonstrate a little bit of flexibility around others, knowing where that line is very important for you. And so a lot of the practice was around finding that line. The other important thing that we were introduced to in this intervention was around listening. That was the first time I had a proper intervention around listening. Now, the exercises and the practice that come out of this were around listening with your head, which most of us do. So we're beyond now listening to respond. So this is, listening to respond.
That was
beyond that you understand you should
prelims.
respond. Yeah.
Okay.
So now you're listening to the person with your head. And what you're trying to do is work out, like, logically and factually, what are they saying, rationalizing, getting it in. The second layer of that is listening with your heart.
Okay.
So now this is at an emotional level. So you're listening not just with what the facts they're saying, but how they're saying it, what emotion is behind it, what are you imputing from that sort of stuff. And then the last one, and that's what then this level took a long time to practice, and obviously we all still practice it, but it was something called listening with your soul. Now that is basically you're listening to the person, but you are putting yourself in their position.
Okay.
You are almost being them as they're telling you the story and trying to now work out what they are actually saying. And so you're putting their context around it and everything you can possibly imagine. And the whole point of that was about much deeper listening skills and much deeper listening. The people out of this course hopefully would have ended up with much deeper listening abilities. And it is very difficult to apply all the time. And to be honest, most of us, including me, get caught at that listening to respond stage. And, but the knowledge that those other layers exist and the willingness to want to practice as much as you can, that for me was extremely valuable. And so this book changed the way I thought about a lot of stuff. It's the evolution of so IQ to EQ. And then beyond EQ is cultural intelligence, CQ.
Okay.
And yeah, I thought it was important. It was really important.
How does this play into your interest in, diversity, equity, inclusion, and your leadership positions and
Sure, yeah,
approach?
Very much. So the interest I have in diversity, equity, and inclusion, some of it is structural. So I chair the Transformation Committee, and I've had roles in transformation in my various employers over time. But I'm also very interested in core concepts like equality and fairness and justice. And when the structure is wrong or the system is wrong, how do you change the system and how do you change the structure? And it's that sort of stuff that I actually would like to think through quite a bit. Books like this certainly help me work out other people's perspectives much, much more clearly, especially the listening bit. A lot of the problems that we currently face, I think, are because actually people are just not listening to each other. And maybe they're listening beyond to respond, but then they're stopping at the factual level or the heart level and I think it's about getting it all the way down. And so, the translation of this book into scalable intervention that can change thousands of people at a time, I haven't quite worked that out yet, but I certainly will do it as often as I can in as small a group as possible, as necessary, to just keep on reiterating the same thing. So listening is actually at the core of a lot of what I believe is sort of what we're struggling with.
It feels, from what you're saying, it's almost a time element as well, because if you don't respond immediately, people are onto the next thing or lose interest or become impatient. So how do you show that you are listening well when you actually, responding isn't the immediate thing you should do? Yes.
No, yeah, and it's really harder because everyone has their own time frame of things, and some things are quite quick, and or the expectation is that something will happen quite quick, and other people sort of have a much longer time frame. And when you're responding as a leader, or when you're responding in even smaller groups, you're actually just trying to have a conversation, the diverse range of timing will drastically influence what you say is perceived by people, because you could be saying something and actually it's just not fast enough. You're not working fast enough. And it's that sort of stuff that it makes it really hard when it's topics like this, especially diversity, equity, inclusion topics, which are, if you talk about some concepts, gender, race, hundreds of years of pressure cooker boiling, because it's not things are not changing. And you talk about other elements as well, the long standing issues that are being grappled with here. So I don't really have an answer except for people, I have tried to, as far as possible, humanize everyone in the process, that everyone here is trying to achieve an outcome or trying to achieve the best possible outcome. And they're all human beings with all the foibles and all the stuff that we were talking through already. And I think it's about this trust in leadership, that you trusting that someone is doing their best and going to try and move it along as fast as they possibly.
Give them benefit of the doubt. think about their intention.
Think about yes, exactly. And there is that thing where people say, we're very quick to judge other people by their actions, but not by their intention.
That's for us different.
It's the other way about, right? And that cuts both ways, I think. There's you can't have too much of one and too little of the other. But I think there's a little bit more of that that can help.
Okay. Do you have a quote you can read from Cultural Intelligence?
Yeah, I do. I've got a couple of quotes. So the first one, a measure of a person's power is that their circle of influence is greater than their circle of control. And then the second one, and it speaks a little bit of the progression, and this is the book's premise. Organizations often appoint leaders for their IQ.
Mm-hmm.
Then years later, they sack them for their lack of EQ, which is emotional intelligence, and then Common Purpose argues that in the future, they will promote for CQ, which is cultural intelligence, and everything associated with it.
Why do they say culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Well, exactly. Peter Jaku had it right many, many years ago. No, exactly.
So how do you, in your roles as the President-Elect, what are some of your priorities? How do you think all these books and influences will kind of have an impact on how you lead the society?
Yeah, so the society currently has a clear strategy around assurance and member support, the acquisition pipeline of members, keeping us as healthy as possible as a society, the professionalism of the members, all of that. That's all part of the strategy. And I think, there's nothing wrong with the ASSA, the Actuarial Society strategy. It is solid. We've got enough things to do. I think it's about the leadership levels or the next sort of leaders just taking it to continues to improve, take it to another level, continue to be aware to the environment that we're in, because a lot of times the strategy probably is okay, but then the environment changes, and actually it just needs to be tweaked to the environment that we're in. I think right now, we are grappling with big, weighty professionalism issues, governance issues, disciplinary issues. We're grappling with relevance questions in some parts of the country or some parts of government. All of that, has to be a part of certainly how I'm thinking about the world. I haven't yet gone through the process of sort of thinking to myself, refreshing of the strategy or anything like that. I mean, my approach has been naturally a lot more collaborative. Through the current president, Costa, working with him and myself, then there will be a council strat day coming up, and we'll be getting much broader views on where we think we need to go as a profession. Mm-hmm. I see my biggest role as in prioritization and working with.
That's your priority.
Exactly. My priority is to prioritize because we are a profession with limited resources. South Africa is a big association, a society, but also, not as big as some of the big brothers and sisters we have out there. And so how do we maximize our limited resource is really, really, I think, what the role is. We have an extremely strong executive team within the Actuarial Society office as well that keeps this organization on even keel and moving forward. And so, between the volunteer leaders, the executive leaders, the council leaders, we've got enough strong-minded, extremely good people in the mix. Just getting us focused on the right stuff.
I believe you're the right guy to do it.
Thank you.
So we've been through all the books. Can you just recap their names and authors again for those who want to write it down?
Sure. So the first one was Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. The next one was Factfullness by Hans Rosling. We then looked at Autobiography of a Yogi by Parmahansa Yogananda. We had The Happiest Man on Earth by Jaku, and then we had Cultural Intelligence by Julia Middleton.
Nalen, I'm going to do something very cruel and say, you're going to a desert island, you can only bring one of these books with you. Which one will it be?
Sure, only one. Well, given that I need to still read the Autobiography of a yogi many more times, I'd probably take that one because it would take me the rest of my life to actually get the full benefit of it.
That'll keep you busy for a while.
That'll keep me very busy. Yes.
Yeah. And before I let you go, I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions about your reading, just because I'm curious. So what's the book you would say you recommend to the most people, gift to the most people?
So I actually haven't gifted books in a while, beyond kids' books. Books, I haven't. And so it's not going to be a quick fire question, actually. It's going to be a mix depending on the person and depending on what they seem to like. You know, a bunch of the nonfiction stuff predominantly is the one I would start recommending.
Okay. Do you like Kindle or physical books?
No, physical, definitely. Yeah, no, yeah, definitely.
If you're not enjoying a book, do you DNF it and do not finish?
Yes, with much heartache, because I am a bit of a completer finisher personality, but I do, life's too short.
Exactly. I still need to overcome that barrier, that mental barrier.
Well, if you want a perspective, like a FOMO perspective on that, so I worked it out. I read, I don't know, maybe 10 books a year, 10 to 12 a year.
Okay.
Not a lot, but that's sort
quality
of mix, right? And if I live as long as my paternal grandfather, that gives me another 500 books for the rest of my life. So life is too short to be spending time, given all the millions of books out there. I need to choose 500.
That is one of the most depressing thoughts, is that you won't be able to read all the books.
You can't read them all.
Yeah, that are out there. Do you think audiobooks are cheating? Or?
No, I think they're good. I think they're really practical. Really practical.
Do you judge a book by its cover?
Yes, the back cover.
Yeah, you were mentioning about the market you go to. If you wrote a book, what do you think the subject would be?
Sure. I'm not really sure. I think it'll be something around, hopefully something around your brain and just how powerful it can be. And if you unleash that power, what can happen? A little bit of spirituality, a little bit of leadership, a little bit of everything.
Okay. What age do you think children should learn to read at?
In the womb.
That's the correct answer.
Is that okay? I might be invited again to the podcast then. Okay, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, you may be cancelled, but not on this podcast. And when you read fiction, do you value prose or plot?
Plot, definitely plot.
Okay. And which book have you reread the most in your life?
So, kids' books are the ones that I have as a child. I've read a couple of times. Hardy Boys books in particular.
Okay.
But since about matric, it's actually only been segments or sections of books. I haven't actually reread an entire book. And it's partly, I'm putting it down to partly this 500 book calculation of mine. That I got to get moving.
I feel the same. As much as I love a book, I don't need to read it again. I'd rather, read something else. Yeah. And what are you currently reading?
So that FOMO thing is like quite deep. So I actually I read a couple books at a time. So
okay, that's a good question as well.
So right now it's 4 books. It's two fiction books. One is about sort of crime in sort of medieval England, and the other one is a Tom Clancy thriller sort of thing. And then 2 nonfiction books, one nonfiction book, which is by Nancy Klein, the person who invented the time to think methodology, The Promise That Changes Everything. And then I'm reading actually that book I mentioned, my son. It's a tween science fiction thriller that he read in like a few weeks. And I thought, well, this is very interesting. And so I've actually been reading this book that he has another just filler. Just to see what.
Do you know the name?
It's called Adam 2. Adam 2, yeah. It's a very, very interesting book. Actually, it was very popular in their school, and there was huge queues at the libraries, and it was crazy. And so he went to Exclusive Books and bought it himself. And that's why I thought, well, if it's that important,
yeah,
I'm going to read it.
Next Harry Potter.
Yeah, exactly. So no, it's just very good. Very good book.
And then last question, where can people find you? And is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, so you're definitely welcome, on most social media, but LinkedIn is probably the best place if anyone wants to connect. Maybe the last things to share: just be kind to people. Just build up the people around you. Be as inclusive as possible. Open up your environment, and just keep on learning, relearning, and growing.
And reading.
Go through reading.
Thank you so much, Nalen. It's been an absolute privilege.
That was wonderful to be here. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you so much.